I have studied
Hold
62
on.
intelligent
I've got you.
species across
What
11 star
happened to it?
systems.
Move,
I
get
have
out of the way!
cataloged their fear responses, their social hierarchies,
okay?
their capacity for
With
cruelty,
you always.
and their even greater
We'll get through
capacity
this.
for indifference. I have sat in observation chambers and watched civilizations make choices that determined the fate of millions. I have filed reports so precise they could reconstruct the emotional architecture of an entire species from a single recorded interaction. None of that prepared me for a man who tripped over me and then refused to keep walking. My name is Vela, former senior analyst, Dravosi Compact Intelligence Division, clearance Tier 4, access to 17 classified operational networks, current status fugitive. Wanted for the theft of sensitive biological data, the unauthorized activation of a dormant archive system, and the general crime of knowing too much about too many things the Compact preferred to keep quiet. On the morning this story begins, I was lying on the floor of Waypoint Heron's lower docking ring, bleeding slowly onto cold metal, with exactly the right amount of injury to look like I couldn't fight back. I want to be precise about this because precision matters. I was not helpless. The helplessness was real, but it was also deliberate, which is a very different thing from accidental. The plan had taken 3 weeks to construct. The Compact had been hunting me across 4 stations, and I had finally stopped running because running was losing. Their advance agents found me on the lower ring exactly where I had positioned myself. The confirmation process was not gentle. They used a compact plasma unit, 2 shots controlled angle, the kind of wounds that would read as incapacitation on any scanner, but would not kill me before their extraction team arrived. I had studied the Compact's field protocols for 11 years. I knew what they would do. I let them do it. The burns were real. The blood pooling under my shoulder was real. But I had chosen the floor. I had chosen the position. I was waiting for the extraction team to walk me into a transport and carry me directly to the one facility in this region of space that I could not reach any other way. It was a good plan. Then Ren Vaskar tripped over my leg and nearly dropped a crate of engine components on my head. I will describe him the way I saw him in that first moment, because first moments matter. He was young, close to 28, standard years, with the kind of face that had decided early on to be honest about everything it was feeling. Dark hair badly cut, a jacket with grease stains on both sleeves that were not accidental. They were the marks of a man who worked inside machines, who reached into places most people would not, who fixed things for a living and did not consider this remarkable. His boots had been repaired twice with metal plates that did not match. One was copper-colored. One was the dull gray of a recycled hull panel. He looked at me for exactly 2 seconds. Most species, when they encounter an injured stranger in a public space, complete a rapid threat assessment. They calculate risk, social exposure, personal cost. The more intelligent the species, the faster they complete this calculation. The more advanced their civilization, the more sophisticated their reasons for walking away. He did not walk away. "Hey," he said, quietly. "The way you say something when you are not sure if the other person can hear you, but you are going to try anyway. You alive." A security drone drifted past on its patrol loop, scanned us both, and announced in the flat tone of automated systems everywhere that I was a non-priority life form. It moved on. Around us, the docking ring continued its relentless noise. People walked past, some slowed, none stopped. He stayed. A man nearby muttered something about species that sometimes exploded. Not accurate for the record, but corrections in this situation rarely helped. He slid his arms under my shoulders. I should have pushed him away. I had 3 functional limbs and enough strength left in my upper body to make things uncomfortable for him. My training had specific protocols for exactly this type of interference. A stranger lifting me from my position would displace me from the extraction point and destroy everything I had built in 3 weeks. I did not push him away. I have thought about why many times since. The most honest answer I have found is this: in the moment his arms came under me and he took my weight without hesitation, without calculation, without asking anything of me at all, something in my threat assessment simply stopped working. He was not behaving like a threat. He was not behaving like an ally. He was behaving like a person who had decided that someone on the floor should not be on the floor, and that was the entire extent of his reasoning. A security officer stepped forward. Regulations. Protocols. Ren Vaskar looked at him with the patient expression of a man who had been told the rules before and had already decided which ones applied to him. "She'll be dead in 5 minutes," he said. "Write me a fine." The officer hesitated. After 3 seconds that felt much longer, he stepped aside. The crowd parted, and I, Vela senior analyst, tactical operative, architect of a very carefully constructed plan that was now completely destroyed, was carried through Waypoint Heron's docking ring by a man in mismatched boots who was shaking slightly from the effort, but had not once considered putting me down. His apartment sat above an old maintenance corridor that smelled of warm metal and the particular kind of solitude that accumulates in places where one person has been alone for a long time. The space was small and absolutely full. Not cluttered, there is a difference. Clutter is chaos. This was density. Every surface held something that was either being repaired or waiting to be repaired or had been repaired and not yet returned to wherever it came from. I cataloged what I saw while he set me down on a workbench, moving tools aside with a single sweeping motion. In the corner, a stabilizer array from a Marathi-class cargo hauler, at least 40 years old, disassembled and reorganized into something that should not have functioned, but clearly did. On the far wall, 3 atmospheric processors from 3 different species wired together in a configuration that none of their original engineers would have approved and that somehow served as a single, more effective system. On the floor, a communications relay stripped of its proprietary encryption module and rebuilt around an open-source framework that, as far as I knew, only existed in theoretical papers published by independent researchers the major powers preferred to ignore. This man was using technology from at least 4 civilizations to fix things that people had decided were beyond fixing. He did not know this was remarkable. The medical scanner he used on me was outdated by a decade and a half. It complained audibly about my biology flashing error codes. He ignored the error codes and read the underlying data with the focused calm of someone accustomed to getting useful information out of systems that were trying very hard not to give it. He brought me water in a plain cup, set it beside my hand, and said, "It's water, not a trap. If it's a trap, it's a bad one." I stared at it. In 62 species, I have observed many responses to an injured stranger. Calculation, pity, fear, clinical efficiency, moral obligation, performed without warmth. I have never been offered water like it was simply the next logical thing to do. I drank it. Hours passed. When I came back fully, he was at his workbench, not watching me, moving quietly, making small adjustments with a tool he held loosely, the way people hold things they have held 1,000 times. "You should not have brought me here," I said. He exhaled, not quite a laugh. "Good morning to you too. They will trace the residue. My blood carries a biological signature. It functions as a locator beacon." He looked at the floor where faint luminescence still marked the seams despite visible scrubbing. "How much time does that give us? Not what are you, not why are you here. How much time? Straight to the operational question." "Enough," I said. "If you had not already filed a residency scan when you carried me through the docking ring checkpoint." I walked around the checkpoint. He said this without any particular pride, purely informational. "It adds 4 minutes. I always walk around it. The scanner there has been miscalibrated since the last maintenance cycle, and it flags everything. I've reported it 6 times, nobody fixed it." I told him my name. I told him I had been a senior analyst for the Dravosi Compact, the organization whose authority held together about 1/3 of the inhabited stations in this region of space, including Waypoint Heron. I told him I had left under circumstances they classified as theft, and I classified as the only morally defensible choice available to me. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he nodded once. "What were you actually doing on the floor?" he asked. I paused. Most people do not ask that. Most people assume an injured person on the floor is there because something bad happened to them. The idea that someone might choose to be on the floor, might position themselves deliberately, it does not occur to most people. He had asked it like it was the obvious next question. "I had a plan," I said. "A compact extraction team was coming to collect me. I intended to allow myself to be taken because the facility I need to access is one I cannot reach any other way." Their advance agents confirmed my location, and I accepted what came with that. He understood what that meant without my having to explain it further. I could see it in the way his expression shifted, not with pity, but with the particular respect of someone who understands the cost of tactical thinking applied to oneself. "And I ruined your plan." "Yes, because I picked you up." "Yes." He turned back to the workbench and started pulling parts from drawers. "Okay, what do you actually need?" Before I could answer, the scanner on the workbench chimed. He looked at it. His expression shifted, not alarm, but the particular attention of someone who has noticed something wrong and is deciding how wrong it is. "Can I run a deeper scan? I'm seeing a secondary signal. Consistent frequency cycling on a fixed interval. It's not your biology." He paused. "It's inside your biology." The room became very quiet. He turned the screen toward me. The readout was crude, but I understood it immediately. I had seen this readout before in a compact medical file I was not supposed to have accessed, belonging to an operative who had been brought in for debrief and had not come back out. A kill switch, surgically implanted, wrapped in biological material that would have been invisible in a standard scan. The compact had put it in me during a routine medical assessment 3 months ago, before I had known I would need to question it. It was designed to ensure that if I could not be recovered, I could be ended. And everything I carried, everything encoded in my cellular structure, would end with me. I had not known it was there. For a moment, I sat with that, the specific quality of betrayal that comes not from an enemy, but from a system you once served. The standard activation interval is 18 hours after a missed confirmation signal, I said. But these devices carry a grace period approximately 6 hours to account for signal disruption in deep station sectors. My last confirmation was 22 hours ago. That puts us inside the grace window. We have roughly 2 hours before the device determines the absence is intentional. He did not flinch. Tell me everything you know about the signal frequency, he said, and reached for his tools. In the window corner, half hidden behind a coil of insulated cable, I noticed something I had not registered before. A man in dock worker coveralls had paused in the service corridor outside. He was looking through the small, scratched glass of the exterior panel. Not moving, not doing any of the things dock workers do when they have stopped moving. He stood there for 4 seconds. Then he adjusted his collar and walked away. I filed it. Then the Wacom crackled. Station-wide broadcast, the kind reserved for announcements that the station authority wanted no one to miss. Attention residents of Waypoint Heron. Security bulletin. A foreign entity of unknown classification escaped containment during the recent docking ring incident. Citizens are advised to report all sightings of a tall, luminescent, non-human female. A reward is available. Ren set down his tools. We looked at each other across the small, bright space of his workshop. 2 hours left on a clock neither of us had known was running until 10 minutes ago. They're not searching quietly, he said. They never do. When the compact broadcasts, it means they want everyone else to do the finding for them. He was quiet for a moment. How many people on this station would turn you in for a reward? Most of them. Yeah. He stood up and picked up his wrench, old heavy, the grip worn smooth by years of the same hand. We have about 12 minutes before a patrol sweep reaches this sector. There are maintenance tunnels behind the storage locker. I use them to avoid the rent inspectors. He looked at me with an expression I did not have a single word for. Not confidence, not optimism, something quieter and more durable than both. Then we figure out the rest, he said. I looked at him, at the mismatched boots and the 2 hours counting down inside my chest. I swung my legs off the workbench and followed him into the dark. The tunnels beneath Waypoint Heron smelled of warm metal insulation and air that had been recycled so many times it had forgotten what outside meant. Ren moved through it like he had grown up in the dark. He knew which junctions to avoid, which pressure seams to keep weight off, which turns to make without looking. The tunnel responded to him the way spaces respond to people who have spent enough time inside them. Above us, at intervals, boot steps. The patrol was moving in a standard grid pattern, efficient, thorough, exactly what the compact's field doctrine prescribed. I knew the doctrine because I had written 3 updated versions of it over 6 years of service. Ren stopped at a junction where 4 tunnel segments met around a central power relay. He opened his toolkit and began pulling out components. A drone chassis mid-repair, casing already removed. 3 signal dampeners. A sensor strip he pressed briefly against my wrist. The strip lit up. Your signal pulses on a cycle, he said. Every 90 seconds, same interval. The compact uses fixed intervals for biological tracking. Within their system, predictability is considered a feature. He almost smiled. If you invert the phase carrier and run it through the drone's broadcast module, you can stretch the signal instead of masking it, I said. It will appear to originate from multiple locations simultaneously. I looked at him. I spent 4 years designing surveillance systems. I know how they break. He held out the wiring without a word. I took it. We built the device together. I told him which connections to make. He made them with precision that required no correction. There is a particular quality to working alongside someone who listens completely, not waiting for you to finish so they can respond, but actually receiving what you give them and using it. Within the compact, information was currency, and sharing it was a controlled transaction. This was different. This was 2 people solving a problem in the dark. The device hummed to life. My internal awareness of the implant fragmented, split. Where there had been one signal, there were now echoes, spreading outward in 6 directions, each slightly different in strength, each slightly delayed. Above us, the patrol rhythm changed. Drone patterns shifted. Commands overlapped. The grid broke apart as units tried to reconcile the data their sensors were returning with the logic their programming demanded. They'll adapt, I said. I know, but it buys us 20 minutes. He was moving again. I followed him to a service hatch that opened into a maintenance alcove above one of the station's secondary power conduits. He climbed through first, then helped me up. My side protested with a focus-specific pain that I noted and set aside. Then something unexpected happened. The command channel went quiet. Not disrupted, not jammed, quiet. The kind of deliberate silence that comes from authority choosing not to speak rather than being prevented from speaking. Patrol units stopped transmitting position updates. Drone routing commands ceased. For 90 full seconds, the station's security network produced nothing but static. Ren looked at his portable scanner, then at me. "They stopped moving," he said. The words landed with weight neither of us immediately examined. Below us, the conduit pulsed. Around us, the accumulated sound of a station that had spent the last hour in controlled crisis began to loosen. I felt my shoulders drop a fraction. 2 hours on the kill switch. Signals scattered. A force that had been actively hunting us now apparently standing down. It was possible, not certain, but possible that the signal fracture had been enough. That they had decided the recovery was no longer worth the visibility cost of tearing apart a civilian station. Ren exhaled slowly. He set the scanner down on the alcove floor and pressed his back against the wall. For 30 seconds, neither of us spoke. Then my chest tightened. Not the injury, not the normal cycling of the implant. A sudden compression, a narrowing like something contracting around a signal that had been deliberately squeezed from the outside. The compact had not stood down. They had gone quiet because they were doing something that did not require communication. They had reached into the network remotely and accelerated the kill switch. "They shortened the interval," I said. My voice came out steady, which surprised me. "They monitor absence patterns, not just whether an operative goes dark, but how. The fracture signal told them I was still mobile, still functional, still a risk worth ending rather than recovering." I looked at the readout forming on the scanner. "We have 40 minutes. Ren was already on his feet. But before he could speak, a voice cut through on the open maintenance channel. Not a broadcast, a direct routing someone who knew exactly which frequency the service tunnels used. The voice was composed, unhurried, carrying the specific authority of someone who had spent years being listened to. Ren went completely still. I recognized the quality of that stillness. It was not fear, it was recognition. "You know that voice," I said. "Voros." The name came out quiet and flat. "He managed the workshop below Sector 4. He fired me 6 months ago. Budget restructuring." A pause. "Apparently." I looked at him. The workshop below Sector 4, which meant Voros had been present on this station in close proximity to Ren's workspace and the tunnel network above it for as long as Ren had been living there. Which meant he knew the layout, the access points, the specific miscalibrated checkpoint Ren always walked around, every shortcut and every weakness in the maintenance network that Ren had spent years quietly learning. The compact did not place assets randomly. They placed them in proximity to infrastructure that might become operationally useful. A mechanic who knew every tunnel, every relay, every forgotten junction in the station's underbelly was exactly the kind of resource a competent intelligence operation would want to know in advance. Ren had been surveilled for longer than either of us had been aware. The voice of Voros moved through the channel again, calm and familiar, and entirely wrong. "Ren," he said, "we know exactly where you are. We have known since the junction in Corridor 7. You have 40 minutes and nowhere to go that I have not already mapped. Bring her to the maintenance exit on Level 3, and this ends without further damage to anything you care about." Ren looked at the conduit below us, at the portable transmitter in his kit, at me. "He knows the tunnels," I said. "He knows the tunnels I use," Ren said. "He doesn't know the ones I stopped using because the thermal shielding in Sector 2 makes them invisible to standard scanners." He was already moving. "There's a core access node in the substructure below Sector 2. Direct hardwire into the main conduit network, no relay. Anything broadcast from there goes everywhere at once." "How far?" 8 minutes if we move now." He looked at me, and in his face I found something I had been trying to identify since the moment he crouched next to me on the docking ring floor. Not courage, not stubbornness, though there was plenty of both. Something underneath those things, a bedrock quality. A person who had found the thing they actually believed in and had decided it was worth the cost of believing in it. I had something to tell him first. "What I am carrying," I said, "you need to know what it actually is, not what the compact says, what it is." He waited. 47 years ago, the Dravosi compact made contact with a species called the Vesori, a quiet civilization non-expansionist built around the preservation of collective memory. They encoded their history in biological archives, living records carried in the cellular structure of their people passed from generation to generation as something between instinct and inheritance. They remembered everything. Every loss, every discovery, every face of every person who had ever mattered to someone who mattered to someone else. The compact determined that the Visori occupied a region of space with significant resource potential. In 72 hours, they were gone, not killed outright, dismantled. Their civilization removed from the record, their archives suppressed, their existence reclassified as an unverified pre-contact myth. But one archive survived, compressed, dormant, hidden in a retrieval protocol so obscure that even the Compact's own medical division had not fully understood what they were implanting when they used it as the framework for my kill switch. The Visori's last memory, sealed inside me, waiting. It was not a weapon. It was not a code. It was a record, every operational order, every falsified report, every name of every person at every level of authority who had signed off on what was done to the Visori and then looked away. 47 years of careful burial, perfectly preserved, and it was designed to interface with any sufficiently large communications infrastructure and replicate outward. Every record the Compact had buried, every name, every face, every crime. I had been trying to reach a Compact facility not to access their systems, but because their core relay was the most powerful broadcast array in this region of space. I needed the range. I had been carrying this for 3 months. I had not known about the kill switch. I had thought I was the one making the choice. When I finished, Ren was quiet for 3 full seconds. "How much power does a broadcast like that need?" he asked. "Biological interface only. It cannot be triggered mechanically. The encoding responds to living cellular input. I have to be the one to activate it, and doing so will mark my position exactly. And activating it through the core node gives it the range to go past this station." "Yes. What does activation feel like?" The question stopped me. I had prepared for many responses to my situation, not that one. "I don't know," I said, honestly. "No one has activated one in 47 years. He nodded. "He did not tell me it would be fine." "Then we make sure we've done everything else first," he said. "So when you do it, it counts." We moved. Bow. The substructure below Sector 2 existed in the kind of silence that stations only produce in places nobody has needed for a long time. Emergency lighting. Exposed conduit running in thick parallel lines overhead, close enough to touch, thrumming with low-frequency energy that I felt in my back teeth. The floor was raw metal, unfinished, never meant to be seen. Ren moved through it like he belonged to it, and I followed 3 steps behind and above us. The station held its breath. The core access node was exactly where he said it would be. A recessed panel in the junction wall, older hardware directly hardwired into the main conduit network. No relay, no intermediate processing. Ren opened the panel and looked at it for 4 seconds. Then he looked at me. "The kill switch first. We do not have... If activating the archive puts you under physical strain, I need the kill switch gone before that happens. Otherwise, you might not survive long enough for the broadcast to finish." I did not argue. He was right. I gave him everything I had on the device's signal architecture. He listened once. He did not ask me to repeat anything. What he built over the next 11 minutes should not have worked. The approach, using his own bioelectric frequency as a carrier wave to spoof the kill switch's confirmation signal, was theoretically documented in exactly one independent research paper, with approximately 40 downloads, considered a curiosity rather than a methodology. He had not read that paper. He arrived at the same solution through working knowledge and a refusal to believe that a problem was unsolvable simply because the standard approaches had failed. He connected the device to the panel's interface and ran a test signal. The compression in my chest paused, then resumed at a different interval, slower, deceived. "It won't hold forever," he said, "but it'll hold long enough." I sat with that for a moment. The specific quality of a weight you have been carrying so long, it has stopped feeling like weight, and then suddenly it is lighter. "There is a consequence," I said, "to what you just did." "I know. Your frequency is now in their system. They will be able to..." "I know, Vela." The way he said my name, the particular quality of someone who has accepted a thing completely and does not need to discuss it further because the decision is already made in solid and does not require maintenance. He had tied himself permanently to the Compact's tracking network, not by mistake, not without understanding. He had looked at the Waston and decided it was acceptable, and he had done it the same way he did everything, without announcement, without requiring that anyone acknowledge the weight of it. I looked at him in the dim substructure light, and I thought about 11 years of careful observation, and I thought about how long I had believed that understanding a thing was the same as knowing it. I had understood humans in the abstract for years. I had never known them. "The archive," he said. "Tell me what you need." "Physical contact with the access node." I place my hand on the panel and hold it until the transfer completes. While it runs, I may not be able to move. Then I'll be here, he said. He positioned himself beside me, slightly behind, in the way someone positions themselves when they intend to be a brace. Not intrusive, not performative, just present. But first, before I placed my hand on that panel, I did something he did not see me do. While Ren was making the final connections on the spoofing device, I had run a secondary calculation. The carrier wave he had used to deceive the kill switch had bound his bioelectric signature to 3 specific relay nodes in the compact's tracking network, the ones with the highest signal propagation range. Worst case outcome for him: maximum exposure. I had spent 4 years designing surveillance systems. I knew their architecture better than the people currently operating them. And I had noticed while studying the conduit interface that the archive's broadcast would create a brief window of total network overlap, every system the compact operated in this region simultaneously processing the same data flood. In that window with the right insertion point, it was possible to overwrite the binding on those 3 relay nodes. Not remove them entirely, but reclassify them as part of the public record the archive was creating, which meant any attempt to use them to track Ren would be permanently visible to every observer network in the region. The compact would not use visible infrastructure, not now. I had done this before he had finished his work. I had not told him because he would have argued about whether it was worth the additional complexity, and it was, and we did not have time for the argument. I placed my hand on the panel. For 3 seconds, nothing. Then everything at once. The archive opened like a door that had been sealed for half a century, and behind it was not data in any form. I had a framework for it was memory, living memory, the specific weight of a people who had understood when the end came that their only chance of survival was to compress themselves into something too small to find and wait for someone willing to carry them forward. I felt them, not as individuals, as the accumulated texture of a civilization, the particular quality of how they had loved, how they had disagreed, how they had raised their children and buried their old and argued about small things on slow evenings when the work was done. The specific comedy of their misunderstandings and the specific weight of their grief and the irreplaceable color of a world that had existed and been full and then been taken. And underneath all of that, like bedrock beneath soil the record, every operational order, every falsified report, every name of every person at every level of authority who had signed off on what was done to the Visori and then looked away. 47 years of careful burial preserved in the memory of a people who had built their entire civilization around the principle that nothing worth knowing should ever be forgotten. The archive moved through the panel, through the conduit, through the full infrastructure of Waypoint Heron, and from there outward carried on every channel the station touched, which was every channel in this region of space, which was every ship and station and outpost that shared a network with any of them. It did not ask permission. It simply went the way things go when they have been waiting long enough and finally find the path they were designed for. My legs stopped working. Ren caught me before I reached the floor. He did not make a sound. He simply had me both arms the way he had had me in the docking ring 11 hours ago when I was a stranger in a problem and he had not yet had a single reason to help me. He lowered us both to the ground and I leaned against the wall and the archive continued its work through my hand, through the panel outward, unstoppable. Above us, something changed. The percussion of armored boots faltered. Commands overlapped and then contradicted. Somewhere in Corridor 7, a compact enforcement officer received 3 sequential orders that were mutually exclusive and stopped moving entirely while his chain of command tried to resolve the conflict. He was still standing there when civilian engineers sealed the corridor behind him. The compact's systems were not failing. They were questioning. The archive had reached their infrastructure too, not as an attack, as a memory. And somewhere into the processing cores of systems designed to obey without hesitation, the records of what had been done to the Vessery were being cataloged alongside current operational parameters, and the systems were in their precise and literal way, noting the inconsistency between the values they had been programmed to serve and the actions they had been programmed to execute. They were asking for confirmation. The confirmation was not coming. On the open civilian channels, responses came in voice after voice, not organized, not coordinated. The specific beautiful chaos of people deciding independently to do the same thing. A cargo hauler in Sector 3 was repositioning its load to block a corridor. Engineers were rerouting lighting grids. Someone in the lower residential block with access to atmospheric control for their level was, it appeared, exercising it creatively. None of it was elegant. All of it worked. 17 minutes after the archive began its broadcast, the compact's command channel went dark. Not destroyed, not jammed, withdrawn. the specific, deliberate silence of an authority that has decided to stop speaking because everything it might say would be recorded. The enforcement units on the station stopped advancing, then over 4 minutes began moving toward the private docking spines and departed. I lifted my hand from the panel. The ticking in my chest was gone. Not cycling differently, not deceived, not managed. Gone. The kill switch had required a periodic biological signal from within the compact's network to remain armed. The compact's network was no longer responding to anything. I sat on the floor of the substructure below Sector 2 back against the wall and breathed. Ren sat beside me. Neither of us spoke for a long time. The conduit above pulsed with its patient, endless rhythm. "It went through," I said finally. "Yeah, everything. Every record, every name." "Yeah." I turned to look at him. He was looking at the ceiling jaw set, carrying the specific texture of a person on the other side of something large. His hands resting on his knees were completely still. "The tracking signal," I said. "From the carrier wave, I reduced the scope before activation. The 3 relay nodes that would have given them the deepest access to your location, I reclassified them as part of the public record the archive created. Any attempt to use those nodes to track you will be permanently visible to every observer network in this region." He turned his head slowly and looked at me. "I did it while you were finishing the spoofing device," I said. "You would have argued. I would have said you didn't have to do that." "I know, that is why I did it first." Something crossed his face. Not a smile exactly, but the real version of what a smile is trying to be. The hatch above us opened. 3 figures dropped into the substructure. Not compact, not station security. They wore simple markings, observer insignia, the kind carried by accord mediators and institutional historians. The one in front was tall, silver-skinned, with the composed bearing of someone who had been watching events unfold for a long time and had already processed most of their feelings about it. I recognized the posture before I recognized the face. The dock worker, the one who had stood outside Ren's workshop window for 4 seconds and then walked away. The one I had filed and not acted on. "You have been here since the beginning," I said. The observer inclined their head. "We identified Waypoint Heron as a probable catalyst site 14 weeks ago, based on the compact's operational patterns in this sector, and on you specifically." A pause. "We do not intervene. We observe. Those are not the same thing, and the distinction matters." "You watched," Ren said. His voice carried no particular warmth. "We observed a species respond to an ethical crisis without directive, without alliance, without calculation of personal advantage." The observer's gaze moved between us. Waypoint Heron is the 13th site in our current assessment cycle. In 12 previous events, the species present, when the choice was available, declined to act. They had reasons. Good ones, most of them. Survival neutrality, the logical calculus of not becoming a target. The substructure was very quiet. "The compact has withdrawn its public claim on you," the observer said, looking at me. "They will not pursue. Not because they have forgiven, because they cannot afford the visibility of pursuit while the archive is propagating." Relief moved through me so completely that I had to close my eyes. "There is one additional matter," the observer said. Something in the quality of those words made me straighten. "The carrier wave used to deceive. The kill switch created a biological reference profile in the compact's network." The observer looked at Ren directly. "The compact has been running a program for the past 18 months. They acquire biological templates from station residency records and use them to construct operatives indistinguishable from their source subjects at standard scan range. The profile exists to find people the compact needs access to and deploy something wearing their face to get it." Ren's expression did not change, but the quality of his stillness shifted. "They have been deploying operatives carrying your profile," the observer continued, "at resistance nodes in 3 other stations. The operatives gain trust by appearing to be someone who has already demonstrated trustworthiness. Then they dismantle the resistance from the inside." A pause. "In 2 of the 3 stations they have already succeeded. The 3rd is still active." The silence stretched long enough to have texture. Someone was walking around wearing his face. Using the memory of a moment on a docking ring floor, the unremarkable, uncalculated moment of a man who simply did not keep walking as a key to open doors that should not be opened. The thing he had done, the thing that cost nothing by his own accounting, was being worn like a costume by something that understood nothing about where it came from. "Can they be identified?" I asked. "With the right baseline comparison. The biological mimicry is precise, but the behavioral profile cannot be fully replicated. An analyst trained in cross-species behavioral pattern recognition would be well-positioned to detect the deviations." The observer paused. "Small ones, but consistent." I looked at Ren. He was already looking at me. The Accord provided transit. Neutral passage, no affiliation required, no commitment asked. Their ship was small and fast and smelled of recycled air and the specific impersonality of vessels that belonged to no one permanently. Before we left, the resolution period on Waypoint Heron lasted 3 days. The compact did not formally withdraw. They simply became absent, which in diplomatic terms is the same thing while maintaining the appearance of being a different thing. The archive propagated to 47 known networks before the compact's suppression protocols could respond, and by then the response was academic. Information once distributed does not travel backward. Voris was found in a sealed maintenance office in Sector 4, not by station security, by 3 dock workers who had recognized his voice from the open channel broadcast during the crisis and had walked him quietly to the station authorities' holding bay before anyone with conflicting interests could arrange otherwise. The people of Waypoint Heron went back to their routines, but differently. The way you return to a routine after something has shown you what your routines are actually protecting. On the second morning, I found Ren sitting on the floor of what remained of his workshop. Most of the equipment had been displaced during the enforcement sweep. The careful density of his assembled space was disrupted in ways that would take time to restore. He was holding the old wrench, just holding it the way I had seen him hold it during the worst of it, not as a weapon, not as a tool, as the thing you hold when you need to remember you have hands and the hands still work. I stood in the doorway for a moment before he heard me. When he looked up, he did not look like someone who had altered the trajectory of several civilizations in the past 70 hours. He looked like someone who needed sleep and breakfast and to find where his thermal calibrator had ended up. "The Accord is ready when we are," I said. He nodded. "Ren," he looked at me. "What you did accepting the tracking exposure to save my life. I want you to understand what that meant. Not strategically, not in terms of outcome." I stopped, found the words with the care of someone who does not use them carelessly. I have worked with people of extraordinary capability, people of extraordinary courage. I have never worked with someone who treated an injured stranger as a sufficient reason, not the beginning of a calculation, the reason itself. He was quiet for a moment. "You were still moving," he said. "My fingers," I said. "I know. Seemed like enough." I looked at him for a long moment. At the workshop that was in the process of becoming itself again, piece by piece, the way things become themselves again, when the person who cares about them returns. "Keep it," I said. He looked down at the wrench. "I want you to have it. Practically. You are going to need tools you trust in the work ahead." He turned it over once, the grip worn smooth by years of the same hand. Then he stood and clipped it to his belt, and it settled there the way things settle when they are in the right place. We left Waypoint Heron in the quiet hour before the morning cycle lights came up, when the docking ring was its least crowded and most honest. Ren carried a single bag. I carried nothing external, which meant I carried everything that mattered in the only place the compact had never quite managed to reach. As the station fell away behind the viewport, I wrote the first lines of a report I would not send to anyone. I have studied 62 intelligent species. I have cataloged their patterns, their responses, their extraordinary range of reasons for looking away from the things that cost something to see. I did not know until 70 hours on a station I had visited once, and planned never to return to that. The most interesting question was never what a species does when it is powerful. Any species acts from power. Power is easy. The question's what a species does when it has nothing, when it has no strategic advantage, no safety, no promise of return on the investment of caring. When the only thing it has is the observation that someone on the floor has fingers that are still moving and the private conviction that this is sufficient reason. 3 stations away, something was walking around in a borrowed face opening doors that trust had unlocked, not understanding what trust actually cost the person who gives it. We were going to find them, not because we were powerful, not because we were certain, not because we had any guarantee of what we would find on the other side of it, because the problem was there, and we had come too far, both of us, from directions that neither of us had chosen to be the kind of people who looked at a problem and kept walking. Ren had taught me that, or rather he had reminded me of something I had known before the compact had spent 11 years teaching me to forget it. Some things are worth the cost before you know what the cost is. Some choices don't wait for permission. And some people in some moments, with nothing but a wrench and a refusal to calculate, change everything. The stars stretched out ahead of us, unmarked, full of people who had not yet been shown that choosing was possible. We had work to do.